Ambassador Corwin Vess felt the warm weight of his 47-year-old ceramic travel mug as the Catharn counselor's mandibles clicked across the amphitheater in contempt patterns that needed no translation. The sound came sharp and deliberate, a sound that meant, "You are beneath my notice." Around him, the Galactic Council chamber sprawled like a wound, 40 meters wide, pale basalt columns rising 200 feet to a ceiling lost in shadow, tiered alien seating arranged in concentric rings, each ring elevated above the last, so every being in the chamber could look down at the petitioner's pit. The pit where humans sat. The pit where Corwin Vess sat now, on a backless stone bench, his knees level with the feet of the lowest-ranking council observers. A silicon delegate had spilled fermented wine across Vess's shoes exactly 3 minutes earlier, deliberately accidental, no apology, no towel. The laughter that followed told Vess everything about what came next. His left hand trembled slightly as he gripped the mug, early-stage neurological condition. He never mentioned it. The tremor was visible only if you knew to look for it, and Vess made sure no one did. He buried the shake in the mug's warmth, in the familiar worn spot on the rim where his fingers had gripped for 47 years. His wife had given him this mug 18 years ago, on the day before she died. The glaze was chipped, the bottom stained brown from 1,000 mornings of tea. It had survived 3 world wars. It had survived her absence. It would survive this. High Assessor Vren of the Catharn Dominion stood on his hind legs, all 12 feet of him, chitinous exoskeleton glinting under the amphitheater lights, ceremonial venom sacs pulsing in rhythm with his words. The Galactic Council has reviewed humanity's petition for emergency grain relief, Vren announced. His vocal sacs vibrated the air. The request is denied. The Council's analysis indicates your species will sustain itself for 11 cycles. After that, your situation becomes irrelevant to galactic economics. No apology, no consideration, just mathematics. Vess's legs had gone numb 22 minutes earlier. The numbness started in his feet and crept upward while Vren spoke. He could no longer feel the stone bench beneath him. All he could feel was the ceramic mug's weight and the sudden silence that followed Vren's statement. No apology silence. No merciful silence. The silence of a predator that has already turned away. The Vel consensus. Those floating bags of sentient gas, pulsed bright pink with mirth. A Rishan diplomat mimed weeping, its 4 arms pressing against its face in exaggerated sorrow. The chamber erupted, not in anger, in laughter. In the kind of laughter that follows a joke so obvious, so inevitable that everyone is laughing at you simply for not laughing first. Vess did not react. He set the ceramic mug on the stone bench beside his leg. He gripped it with both hands. He felt the worn spot on the rim press against his palms. Then he stood. The laughter did not stop. It grew louder as he rose. It followed him as he turned toward the amphitheater's exit. It chased him down the stone aisle while his 6-person delegation, Dr. Aris Thorne, General Marla Okonkwo, Jian Wei, Commander Sana Reddy, Hester Finch, Liam Cole, stood and followed in silence. No apology, no declaration, no mercy. Behind him the laughter grew louder. Vess did not turn. He did not accelerate his pace. He walked with the kind of precision that comes from someone who has calculated every step in advance and found it acceptable. He walked out of the amphitheater. His delegation followed. The laughter followed them, echoing off stone, growing smaller only when the chamber doors swung shut. Outside, in the corridor that connected the council amphitheater to the human delegation's quarters, Vess finally stopped walking. His legs were numb. His hands still trembled, but his grip on the ceramic mug never wavered. That went as expected, General Marla Okonkwo said. She was 61 years old and her voice carried no emotion. 11 cycles, 9 billion people. That's the timeline. Dr. Aris Thorne removed her reading glasses. They were perpetually smudged and pinched the bridge of her nose. The calculations are correct. We have enough supply to support the timeline, not past it. Then we don't go past it, Vess said. He tucked the ceramic mug into his coat pocket carefully. The mug's warmth pressed against his ribs. We go down now. The basement quarters were 12 feet below the council's main sewage recycling plant. Room 47B, the fluorescent lights hummed their usual complaint. A single metal table sat in the center. One tablet. One photograph of 27 graves in a lunar cemetery. One date, a chip labeled coding complete, year 9. Hester Finch had already brewed tea. 6 cups. Earl Grey. The steam rose in thin wisps that looked like ghosts escaping the ceramic. "Drink," Hester said. She was 70 years old and called everyone love, as if the endearment could stitch the world back together. "You're going to need it." Vess did not drink. He placed the ceramic mug beside the 6 cups of tea and pulled out a chair. The team assembled around the metal table without speaking. Dr. Thorne opened the tablet. Hologram light filled the basement room, blue and sharp and cold. "Status," Vess said. "All 847 units are synchronized," Dr. Thorne replied. She tapped the hologram. Schematics appeared. They showed 847 worlds distributed across 6 galactic arms. On each world, buried under ice or rock or ocean floor, sat a device that looked like a tuning fork made from titanium and grief. "Operation Last Cup is ready." General Okonkwo stepped forward. She pulled out a data pad and placed 847 world coordinates on the display. Her voice remained flat, mathematical, separated from emotion by the precision of coordinates and numbers. "Hesperides 9 is hot. Disruptor 7 confirmed live. Disruptor 14 requires a tower warm-up. Disruptor 847 is still buried under ice. But it will activate when signaled." "How many are still being built?" Vess asked. "None," Thorne said. "We finished the last unit 3 years ago. We've been testing ever since. All 847 are ready." The room held its breath. Jian Wei sat in the corner knitting. His needles clicked softly. Row 847. A blue scarf for his niece. She was 9 years old. He would finish the scarf if there was time. He was not certain there would be time. "What was the cost?" Vess asked. No one answered immediately. The fluorescent lights hummed. The tea steamed. The hologram showed 847 worlds, each one a resonance disruptor, each one buried and ready. 17 years of building, Dr. Thorne said finally. 1 unit requires isotope refinement. The refinement kills, on average, 14 humans. Each one through radiation poisoning or vacuum exposure or structural failure. We knew the probability when we volunteered them. 14% chance of survival per cycle. She paused. "The total cost is 11,858 human deaths." The number sat in the basement like a stone that would never be moved. 11,858 people. Each one a name. Each one a choice to build something that the Galactic Council had laughed at without even knowing it existed. Liam Cole began to speak. He was 31 years old, and his job was to remember. He did this by reciting names in bursts during briefings, as if saying them aloud could bind them to the world. Amira Hassan, 31, reactor technician, Hesperides 9. James Oduya, 47, structural engineer, Epsilon Station. Priya Kaur, 28, isotope processor, orbital platform Meridian 4. Rashid Almansur, 41, test site operator. Vess held up his hand. "Not now." "Later then," Liam said quietly. It was not a question. "Later," Vess confirmed. "We will name them, every single one, but not yet." General Okonkwo was staring at the 847 worlds on the hologram. Her hands were still. Her face was still. But something behind her eyes had moved. 3 of the 847 disruptors were named for her. Samuel, 19. Lay, 22. Marcus, 17. Her children, her soldiers, her dead. "They died so we could build this," she said. It was not a question either. "Yes," Vess said. "They died so we could build this. And so we could teach the council what happens when you laugh at people who have already lost everything." He stood. He retrieved the ceramic mug from his coat pocket and placed it in the center of the metal table. The team stared at it. A chipped ceramic vessel. Old tea stains. The worn grip spot where a wife's hands had held it, and then a husband's hands had held it for 18 years, through marriage and grief, and now through this. "Then we'll teach them to ask," Vess said. The basement went quiet again. Hester poured the Earl Grey tea into proper cups and set them in a circle around the ceramic mug. The steam rose. The fluorescent lights hummed, And in the silence beneath the Galactic Council chambers, 7 people sat at a metal table and understood that they had already won. The only question left was whether the Council would survive the learning. 3 days earlier, Dr. Thorne had remotely activated 14 of the 847 disruptors on scourge-infested border worlds. The parasite's resonance frequency destabilized completely. The scourge, the plague that had killed 2.8 million humans in 17 years, died instantly, entirely. No collateral damage, no ecosystem harm, just gone. The Council did not need to give humanity grain relief. They needed to ask how humans had done what the entire galactic civilization could not. But the Council had laughed instead. They had issued a mathematical denial and walked away. So Vess had walked away too. Now they would return, and the Council would finally ask the right question. Or they would not, and the 847 disruptors would answer for them. BLENDEDCTA. What you're about to learn is what happens when a species stops asking for permission and starts asking better questions. Stay close. NCTA. Now the story moved backward, 17 years backward, because the cold drop, the highest stakes moment in the amphitheater, was only the moment of revelation. The true story was how 7 humans had spent 17 years building the thing that made refusal possible. Phase 2 Snapback. The night was dark in ways that only Earth nights could be dark, not the engineered darkness of space stations, which was always black and absolute. This darkness had texture. It had clouds and wind and the smell of rain that had fallen earlier on the Australian outback. Corwin Vess stood on the balcony of the human delegation building and felt the night air move across his face. His wife's ceramic mug sat on a small table beside him, still warm from tea, still holding the residue of her final gift to him. She had pressed it into his hands on the day before she died and said, "Keep this with you. Even when you're alone in rooms full of people, you won't be alone if you keep this." He kept it now. "The Council denied us," a voice said behind him. Dr. Aris Thorne, age 52, the original architect of the Disruptor Protocol. She had been crying, though her face was dry now. "Officially, on record, they won't even discuss alternative solutions." Vess did not turn. "Then we find our own solution. We've tried. For 3 years we've tried. There is no alternative. The scourge is unsolvable. The Council's own analysis confirms it. We have no way to stop it. We have no way to save ourselves." Vess picked up the ceramic mug. He turned it in his hands, feeling the weight. "Then we build one." "Build what?" "A way." Vess looked at her finally. "Dr. Thorne, how many of us know about the resonance frequency isolation we achieved on the scourge?" Thorne understood immediately. Her eyes widened. 22 people. 22 of us know that we cracked the parasite's resonance signature 11 years ago. And how long has it taken you to develop a prototype disruptor? 5 years, she whispered. But a prototype is not a solution. We would need 847 of them, 1 per major council world. We would need to bury them covertly. We would need to refine isotopes. The cost. What is the cost? Human lives, thousands of them. The refinement process is toxic. The installation in hostile environments would kill test teams. The probability of success is, she trailed off. Is it higher than the probability of surviving the scourge if we do nothing? Thorne was quiet for a long time. Then, yes. If we build 847 disruptors, we save ourselves. And we save the Council. They don't know it yet, but we save them too. Vess set the ceramic mug back on the table. Then, we have 17 years to decide which humans we're willing to lose so that we can teach the Council what they refuse to ask. The team assembled in room 47 the next morning. 7 people. That was all. 7 humans who would know the truth about Operation Last Cup, while the rest of the colony starved, and the Council laughed. General Marla Okonkwo was the first to arrive, 61 years old. She had lost 3 children to the scourge, Samuel, Leigh, Marcus. The youngest was 17. She had come to room 47B because she had nothing left to lose. She had already lost everything that could be taken from her. Now she might build something that made their deaths mean something. "We need a tactical framework," she said. We can't just build 847 disruptors and hope. We need to know where they go, how they're activated, what the fail-safes are. We need a cover story, Jianwei added. He was 44 years old and had trained in intelligence operations for 23 years. We need to build these things without the council noticing. We need to hide the isotope refinement. We need to bury technology on 847 different worlds without leaving traces. We need people, Hester Finch said. She was 70 years old and had been the communications director for the human delegation for 42 years. She knew how to keep secrets. She knew how to make lies sound like truth. We need volunteers who understand they might die. We have them, Liam Cole said quietly. He was 31 years old and worked in the human colony archives. His job was to remember what the colony did not want to remember. He had already begun keeping records of the volunteers. I've been documenting the Scourge deaths for 9 years. I know who has already lost everything. I know who has nothing left to live for, except the possibility that their death means something. Vess listened to them. He held the ceramic mug and listened to 7 humans plan how to sacrifice thousands of others so that someday the Galactic Council might learn to look at them with something other than contempt. Then we begin, he said. We have 17 years. Dr. Thorne, how long until the first disruptor is complete? 2 years, Thorne said. If we work without sleep, if we work without mercy, if we accept the cost. I accept the cost, Okonkwo said. I accept the cost, Wei said. I accept the cost, Hester said. I accept the cost, Liam said. Commander Sonoretti had not spoken yet. She was 39 years old and carried her father's service revolver, the last one in human space. She had kept it loaded with 1 bullet for 17 years, since the day she understood that the Scourge would not stop until every human was dead. Now she pulled the revolver from her holster. She spun the chamber. The single bullet rotated past her eye. 1. That was all. 1 bullet, 1 choice, 1 moment of absolute refusal. If this doesn't work, she said, we die in a basement under a council chamber. That seems fitting somehow. She placed the revolver on the table beside the ceramic mug. It sat there like a promise. We will do this, or we will end. Agreed, Vess said. Then we build 847 disruptors. We build them in secret. We bury them on 847 worlds. And we wait 17 years to teach the Galactic Council what happens when you laugh at species that have already chosen to survive. The first volunteer was named Kenji Nakamura, age 33. He worked in isotope refinement in Subcomplex 4 of the human colony. He had lost his daughter to the Scourge. He had watched her die from radiation poisoning while the doctors tried to cure a plague they didn't understand. When Dr. Thorne approached him with the offer, volunteerism in isotope refinement, probability of survival 14%, he had said yes without hesitation. Yes. Yes to the work. Yes to the probability of death. Yes to the possibility that his death might mean something. The second volunteer was Maya Chen, age 23. She was not supposed to be there. The protocol called for volunteers age 30 and above, people who had already accepted life's disappointments. But Maya had lied about her age. She had added 7 years to her birth certificate because she had watched her parents die of the Scourge while trying to protect her, and she could not live in a world where their sacrifice meant nothing. She volunteered for isotope refinement. Her probability of survival was 14%. She went into Subcomplex 4 anyway. The third volunteer, the fourth, the fifth. By the end of the first year, there were 187 volunteers in isotope refinement. By the end of the second year, there were 847, 1 for each disruptor, 1 death per device, 14% probability of survival, the mathematics of sacrifice. Vess did not watch the volunteers die. He could not. Instead, he kept the ceramic mug with him always. He held it in the basement quarters when Dr. Thorne reported another death. He held it when General Okonkwo placed a stone on the metal table, gray, smooth, worn. 1 stone per death, 1,000 stones by the end, 11,858 stones by the time Operation Last Cup was complete. I will name them every day until I join them, the general said. That was the bargain I made with my son, that he would not be forgotten. They will not be forgotten, Vess promised. I swear it, every single one will be remembered. Jianwei knitted. row upon row of a blue scarf. His needles clicked in the basement quarters like a metronome counting down the days. 1 row per volunteer. 847 rows for 847 deaths. And when the scarf was finally finished, it would be long enough to wrap around the shoulders of a child who might survive because 11,858 humans chose to build something that could make refusal possible. 17 years passed in the basement. 17 years of secrecy. 17 years of volunteers dying in Subcomplex 4. 17 years of stones placed on the metal table. 17 years of Liam Cole recording names. 17 years of Hester Finch making tea and pretending the world was not ending. And then one morning, Dr. Thorne looked up from her tablet and said, "The last disruptor is complete. All 847 of them, buried on 847 worlds, tuned to the same resonance frequency, ready to activate on command, ready to teach the Galactic Council what they had never imagined, that small species could build enormous things, ready to teach them what refusal meant." Corwin Vess held the ceramic mug in both hands and understood that the 17-year plan was complete. Now came the moment of implementation. Now came the moment when the Council would laugh one last time and then learn to ask better questions. He set the mug on the metal table beside the 11,858 stones and waited for the command to return to the amphitheater. The Council reconvened that evening. Vess had calculated the timing with precision. The break would last long enough for news to travel among the 847 delegates, long enough for them to whisper about the human delegation that had walked out, long enough for them to settle back into their seats believing the matter was closed. The humans were finished. The scourge would simply continue until humanity was gone. Vess requested 7 minutes of petitioners' time. The Council granted it out of pity, a minor courtesy to a dying species. But Vess had already decided he would not need 7 minutes. He would need 90 seconds. His wet socks squished against the stone floor of the petitioner's pit as he walked down the central aisle. No one had offered him a towel in the 3 hours since the silicon spill. The wet stayed. It was another small humiliation. Vess carried it the way he carried everything else, with absolute precision. He reached the pit's floor and stopped. The 847 delegates watched. The tiered seating arranged in concentric rings, each one looking down, the pale basalt columns rising like the walls of a tomb. Vess placed the ceramic mug on the stone floor, deliberate, visible. The gesture caught every eye in the chamber. Then he pulled out a tablet. "High Assessor Vren," Vess said, his voice quiet but audible in the acoustic precision of the amphitheater. "You denied grain relief to 9 billion starving humans. You issued a mathematical timeline to our extinction. You laughed." Vren's mandibles began to click, the sound of contempt preparing to speak. But Vess continued before the assessor could form words. "I'm going to show you something." He activated the hologram. On the display, a remote disruptor on the barren moon Hesperides 9 shifted frequency. Just a moment. Just a pulse. But on the edge of the Catharn homeworld, a single automated cargo drone went dark, the lights on its hull extinguished. The engines powered down, the communication signals cut to silence. 12 seconds of demonstration. "That was Disruptor 7, Vess said. "I have 846 more." The chamber did not react. They could not compute what they were seeing. Vess walked to the center display. General Okonkwo stepped forward without being asked and placed 847 world coordinates on the hologram. Coordinates for every founding species territory. Coordinates for major fleet depots. Coordinates for the grain storage facilities that kept the Council fed. "Each disruptor," Vess explained, "is tuned to a specific resonance frequency. The frequency we isolated from the scourge 11 years ago. The frequency you told us was unsolvable." Dr. Thorne's voice came through the chamber's audio system, recorded in calm. "Resonance frequencies are not selective. They travel, they penetrate, they destabilize what they touch." The hologram shifted. A schematic appeared showing the interior architecture of a Catharn reactor core, the crystal lattice that powered their energy systems, the quantum chambers that sang at specific frequencies. Your reactor cores, General Okonkwo said, use resonance technology, as do your warship engines, as do your communication arrays, as do your climate control systems for your grain storage. The shields you've built over millennia, Vess continued, are designed to stop kinetic weapons. Plasma, radiation, not resonance. Your shields are optional against this. Vren stood. His venom sacs pulsated with something that looked like rage, something that might have been panic. You're bluffing, Vren said. His certainty was cracking at the edges. Your species has no capability for this. You have no. I'm not bluffing, Vess said. His voice never rose. I'm asking you a question. The silence was absolute. 847 delegates, 203 species, all of them watching a single human stand in a sunken pit and speak with the kind of calm that comes from someone who has already accepted every possible outcome. Vess lifted the ceramic mug from the stone floor. He did not drink from it, he simply held it. The warm weight, the worn rim, the glaze stained brown from decades of tea and grief. The scourge killed 2.8 million of us in 17 years, he said. Your laughter killed the rest. We didn't come here to beg for grain relief. He paused, the pause stretched. We came here to ask if you'd like to know how we saved your species from the same fate, or if we should let the next one find you. The question hung in the chamber, like a weapon that had already fired. The door to the amphitheater opened, not quietly, not hesitantly. It opened with the kind of deliberation that announces intention. Elder Thessa of the Silurian confluence walked down the central aisle. She was 2,100 years old. She had 12 legs, each one moving in perfect coordination with the others. She was 3 feet tall. Her entire body was soft, segmented carapace, blue-green in the amphitheater light. Her vocal sacs pulsed a quiet indigo, the Silurian color for sorrow understood and transformed into action. She walked directly to the petitioner's pit and sat on the backless bench beside Vess. I will teach them, she said, her voice carrying the weight of 2,100 years. I will make them understand what you are. Behind her, others stood, the Silicon delegation, the ones who had spilled wine with laughter. They rose from their seats. The Vel consensus, the floating gas bags who had pulsed bright pink with mirth. They shifted color to deep indigo, the signal for alliance. The Rishan, who had mimed weeping in contempt, they stood in formal honor position. The Catharn's own client species, 3 hive castes whose subservient position meant they had learned how to see what larger species overlooked. Their mandibles clicked in unison, a sound of solidarity, a sound of small things recognizing small things. 12 species total, the ridiculed, the overlooked, the ones the council stepped over daily. All standing. Vren's mandibles stopped clicking. They went still. For the first time in 800 years of council service, the high assessor had no response to offer. He sat down slowly. His venom sacs deflated. His certainty had been penetrated, and he could not recover the old contempt. Thessa's voice filled the silence. I have read your species' history in the archives. You destroyed yourselves in 3 world wars. You rebuilt. You created weapons of atom splitting, then learned to share nuclear power. You built empires on bones, then decided to remember those bones. You are great because you refuse to stay fallen. She gestured toward Vess. This species has been starving for 17 years. Instead of begging, they solved a problem the rest of galactic civilization couldn't touch. They did it silently. They did it while you laughed. And they did it knowing the cost. What is the cost? Someone asked from the tiered seating. Not Vren, someone else. Someone willing to ask. Vess pulled out a data chip. He walked across the petitioner's pit floor, still wet from the silicon wine, and placed the chip in the hands of a neutral council observer. 11,858 human deaths, Vess said. That is the cost of the disruptors. Each one required isotope refinement. Each refinement killed, on average, 14 humans through radiation poisoning, vacuum exposure, structural failure. We named them, every single one. We remember them. He paused. His left hand trembled, but his voice did not. That is not information. That is an act of honor. The council went quiet, not stunned. Something deeper. The default script had been shattered. They had expected tears. They got architecture. They had expected rage. They got precision. They had expected begging. They got a question about teaching. Vess picked up the ceramic mug from the stone floor where he had placed it. He turned it in his hands, examining the chipped glaze, the worn rim where fingers had gripped it through decades of mornings, the bottom stained brown from tea his wife had loved and he had learned to drink cold, as a way of keeping her present without keeping her alive. He sat beside Thessa on the backless bench. "This is ceramic," he said, his voice staying quiet even though 847 delegates leaned forward to hear him. "We made it from mud. We shaped it with our hands. We fired it in kilns fueled by fossil fuels we burned for thousands of years before we learned they were destroying our world. This mug survived those thousands of years. It survived 3 world wars. It survived my wife's illness and her death. It survived 17 years of me carrying it everywhere, even into the presence of 847 beings who laugh at my species' extinction." He held the mug up to the light. The glaze caught the shine and threw it back. "Ceramic is fragile," Vess continued. "One drop, one careless hand, one misplaced foot, it shatters, but humans keep making it, keep carrying it, keep using it, because fragile things survive, because the act of creation is its own form of resistance." Thessa's vocal sacs pulsed soft blue, the Silurian gesture of understanding. All 12 of her legs reached toward the ceramic mug. She did not touch it with her primary limbs. She touched it with the smaller secondary legs, the ones reserved for acts of reverence. "We didn't solve the scourge because we're warriors," Vess said. "We didn't solve it because we're brilliant. We solved it because we are small, we are fragile, and we refuse to stop trying. That is not weakness. That is the only thing the Council has never understood about us." The silence in the chamber was heavier now. It had weight. It had presence. "Your laughter was insulting," Vess said, "but it was also an invitation, so I'm here to teach you, if you want to learn." No one spoke, no one laughed. The 847 delegates simply sat in their tiered seats and understood that the script they had written for humanity was no longer the script humanity was reading. Then slowly the 12 allied species began to move, not toward conflict, toward recognition. The Silicans bowed. Not the shallow bow of courtesy, but the full bow of formal acknowledgement. The Vel shifted their entire bodies to silver, the peace color, the surrender color, the color of learning. The Rishan placed all 4 hands over their hearts. Thessa reached out with all 12 legs and touched the ceramic mug simultaneously, an act that should have been impossible, an act of reverence that transcended the biological. "I want to learn," she said, and in that moment, the Council's institutional certainty collapsed. Not because of a threat, not because of the disruptors buried on 847 worlds, but because 12 overlooked species had stood and said, "We recognize what you refuse to see." The next morning, a formal notice arrived at the human delegation quarters. The Council grants emergency grain relief to humanity, not because of the disruptors, not because of shame, but because 12 species had publicly aligned with humanity's position. The Council's internal mathematics shifted. A coalition was visible. Therefore, grain shipment was economically rational. Therefore, the vote was unanimous. The news came to room 47B, while Vess was still holding the ceramic mug. Dr. Thorne smiled for the first time in 3 years. Jian Wei set down his knitting. Row 847. The scarf was finally long enough. General Okonkwo did not smile. She placed another stone on the metal table. One more, an additional stone to mark the moment when refusal became recognition. "They granted it," Hester said. She was already preparing tea, 6 cups, Earl Grey. The steam rose like ghosts finally allowed to rest. "They granted it," Vess confirmed. "Now comes the harder part." "The harder part." Liam looked up from his archival work. He had been documenting the votes, recording the names of the delegates who had stood with humanity, recording the names of those who had remained seated. "Teaching them why," Vess said. That evening, the basement became a memorial. Liam Cole read the names aloud. Not all 2.8 million scourge victims, just the 11,858 who had volunteered for isotope refinement. just the ones who had chosen to die, so that refusal would become possible. Amira Hassan, 31, reactor technician, Hesperides 9, died of isotope poisoning during refinement cycle 7. Lei Zhang, 44, buried resonator 14 under ice, died from decompression during installation. Samuel Okonkwo, 19, test site operator, Complex 3, died of radiation exposure during final calibration. General Okonkwo did not stop him this time. She placed stones on the table, one for each name. Her hands were steady. Her face was still, but something behind her eyes had found peace. Maya Chen, 14, isotope processor, orbital platform Meridian 4. James Oduya, 47, structural engineer, Epsilon Station. Priya Kaur, 28, isotope processor, orbital platform Meridian 4. The names accumulated. The stones accumulated. By the time Liam finished, there were 11,858 stones on the metal table, one for each death, one for each volunteer. Vess poured the last of the Earl Grey, the remaining tea from the final canister they had, 4 cups, divided equally among the 7 of them, just under a half cup each. Small things survive, Vess said. He held his half cup with both hands, feeling the warmth. Roaches, moss, ceramic mugs, we bury our dead and name them. That is not weakness. That is the art of survival. They drank in silence. The fluorescent lights hummed. The stones sat on the metal table like monuments to a cost no one else would ever understand. Jian held up the finished scarf, row 847, blue wool, long enough to wrap around the shoulders of a child. For my niece, he said. She's turning 10 next week. She'll have a week to wear it before. He stopped. The old fear was still there. The fear that time had run out. Before she wears it for years, Vess corrected. Before she grows, before she outgrows it and gives it to her own child. That's what survival looks like. Vess placed the ceramic mug in a protective case. The case was sealed with biometric locks. The mug would remain safe. The mug would travel to the Silurian archives, where it would sit under bright lights, where every young Silurian would see it and understand what human survival looked like. This mug, Vess said, will be displayed as a symbol of what human creativity looks like when faced with annihilation. It is fragile. It is small. It is made from mud and fire. And it endured everything. Thessa was still in the basement. She had remained with the team through the naming, through the drinking of the final tea, through the placement of the 11,858 stones. Now she examined the protected mug with all of her sensory limbs. We will place it where every young Silurian sees it, Thessa said. We will teach them your word for it. Survival, Vess said. We call it survival. 6 weeks later, the scourge was officially declared neutralized by the Galactic Council. No announcement was made about humanity's role. No credit was given. No apology was issued for the laughter. But the Council's next emergency session included a new protocol. Small species get equal vote weight in crisis decisions. The change was buried in subsection 47 of Procedural Addendum 12. It would take years for its implications to surface. But it would surface, because Vess had taught the Council to look at what they had been stepping over. Vess stood in the Council chamber one final time at the petitioner's pit. The sunken bench, the stone floor still marked by the silicon wine spill, now faded to a ghost stain that only he could see. Vren was not present. The High Assessor had requested a sabbatical from Council duties. He would not return. The 12 allied species occupied new seating, not at the lowest tier anymore, at eye level with the founding species. Elder Thessa sat among them, her 12 legs arranged with ceremonial precision. Operation Last Cup is officially concluded, Vess announced. His voice filled the amphitheater. We did not come here to conquer. We came here to teach. If the Council is willing to learn, then tomorrow we begin. Lesson 1. Small things survive because they understand that fragility is not a disadvantage. It is a shape that fits into spaces where large things cannot reach. He placed his hand on the ceramic mug one final time. The mug was on the petitioner's pit floor, where it had started this entire sequence of revelations. That is human wisdom, he continued, and we will share it for free. because we have learned that the most dangerous threat is not a weapon that destroys. It is a question that reveals. He turned and walked toward the amphitheater's exit. The council remained silent, but this time the silence carried weight. This time the silence meant something. Outside, on 847 worlds across 6 galactic arms, 847 resonance disruptors powered down. They had never been activated in threat. They had served their purpose simply by existing, simply by being the invisible architecture that made refusal possible. They hummed once, then they stilled. They would never activate again, but they would remain buried and hidden, a permanent reminder that small species could build enormous things, that fragile things could endure, that the act of creation was resistance. In a Silurian archive, under bright lights, a chipped ceramic mug sat on a display pedestal. The glaze caught the light. The worn rim where fingers had gripped it through decades caught the light. The bottom stains from 1,000 mornings of tea caught the light. The label beneath it read, "The petitioner's mug, human symbol of survival through refusal, carried through institutional humiliation into institutional transformation, fragile, enduring, a teaching tool." And on 847 worlds, small species read the label and learned that sometimes the greatest power was knowing how to ask the right question. That sometimes the greatest weapon was a ceramic mug filled with cold tea and carried through a chamber of laughter into a chamber of silence that meant, "We are learning." The stones that General Okonkwo had placed on the metal table were moved to a memorial chamber, not the basement, not hidden, a place where every human could go and place their hand on the 11,858 stones and say the names of the volunteers who had chosen to die so that refusal would become possible. Vess went there on the anniversary of the final disruptor's completion. He placed the ceramic mug beside the stones, not for storage, just for a moment of acknowledgement. Then he walked away, and the mug remained, fragile, worn, small, sitting among the monuments to human survival.